All right, in the bottom right, we just saw him defeat Strange in a PvP. It is the red Protoss, nope, HellraiseR. And his opponent is the blue Zerg. That's Elazer. Okay, so ZVP. Now, HellraiseR, I mentioned in the PvP that in my mind, he's more of the cheesy guy, the all-in-y guy. Strange was actually, though, in that PvP, more of the aggressor. In fact, every game he was the aggressor, whether it was off 2 base or 1 base. But that's PvP, and like, I don't know. But for PvZ, this is where I kind of got in my head that HellraiseR is aggressive, right? It's this matchup. It's his cannon rushing, it's his 2 base all-ins. And I expect those to happen, what I just mentioned, and maybe a decent macro game. King's Cove, you do have kind of a setup as if you are supposed to get to 3 bases, because these bases are all up on a high ground. So maybe this is the one that we see the longer game on, but HellraiseR, kind of coming in here, he would be punching a little bit above his weight against Elazer, but like not so much that it's impossible. Like I could totally see HellraiseR causing that upset, defeating Elazer and forcing Elazer to go down into the lower bracket, which would happen, and Elazer would still be very close to qualifying in that lower bracket because this is a qualifying match. But yeah, it still suck. You face more still damn good people in lower bracket, and spend a lot more time waiting as well. Stargate opener for our Protoss. Elazer is going to scout it with a nicely positioned Overlord. Very easy scout, in fact. And sends a Ling as well down here to get some further scouting. These Lings staying at home. Since he scouted this portion of HellraiseR's base, he doesn't get to scout if there's a Chrono on an Adept or on anything, right? So it kind of misses that there's not an Adept on the way. He could have already sent his Lings out in those scouting positions we see oh so commonly nowadays, right? One at the 3rd or near the 3rd, one at the potential Warp Prism pop out spot, that type of thing. But doesn't really need those Lings to be anywhere, right? Because he at least knows what the tech is. So this, that, the other, whatever, it's not actually huge deals. Point is, Elazer knows what HellraiseR's doing. There is not going to be any Adept that he has to deal with, which he would deal with the positioning of his queens. And he will be losing that Overload to a Phoenix. He won't be losing many or any drones to the Oracle. So let's just go ahead and watch that here. No, not that one. This one. There we go. So the Oracle gets 2 drones, lives. That's the most important part. Overlord doesn't actually die to the Phoenix. There we go. Rowboat, Twilight Council follow-up, Gateways added on here. Nothing too surprising. And once again, the Overlord will see all of that information. We're very close to it. The Rowboat's actually in the natural. Twilight Council leads into a Templar Archive, so it's also charged. Warp Prism for some harassment. He's gonna pick up there. He's gonna pick up the Adepts and the Zealots. Doesn't have much to pick up in that Warp Prism. Okay, he's gonna warp him in. Actually, you know what? He's gonna go for the Archon drop. That's right. It is timing out rather well, as he can offensively use the Warp Prism, maybe like here or something like that. Elazer will not see the timing of this. He didn't actually see the Warp Prism either, because again, no Overlord here. Not that there would be. The Phoenix was going to clean that up. So he'll miss a chance to maybe like catch the High Templars as they're warping in, or as the Archons morphing in. but emerging in, I guess. But he does have some roaches already on the way, and it's something that's a little like, but it's not really going to do a ton of damage. Because if this was paired up with charge lots, right, and like a bunch of gateways finishing, well, that's when that's when Elazer makes a big mistake. But it's just the Archons with harassment, which actually the Queens were already close to defending, so they just move into position once he figures out what's going on, once he overlords all the Warp Prism, and that Spore Crawler was put into an anti-Warp Prism position. Slash, maybe he gets the Oracle, because the Oracle's not being paid attention to. I actually quite like that. Flings did a scout on the third base intention. It's definitely a real third base, and we are still getting probes produced. Forge is finally done, so we'll see +1 started soon. Elazer not quite on the fourth base. Oh, there it is. Yep. Fourth base is started, now +1 missile. Getting some Overlord speed, going heavily into those roaches. I guess Hydralisk later on. HellraiseR will not be able to do much more with this Warp Prism. That took a lot of damage with its one attempt to run in. There's so much anti-air that it's not useless. It is incredibly difficult to depend on, right? Like this won't last very long to even a single queen. So careful, careful, careful. Maybe just dodge around the creep, see if there's any creep tumors that you can get. That might be the safest option as opposed to trying to go into the drone line. Overlords, yeah, okay, that makes sense too. It's a pretty safe option. Maybe this one as well. But he's gonna go ahead and try and distract the queens especially, but there's so many roaches that these zealots don't distract or do anything. It was not gonna work out. Luckily he gets away with it though. We have a, I was gonna say, okay, yeah, that's a lasers drop. As he did get Overlord speed. It's gonna be 4 roaches. That one shot's a probe. Doesn't have the explosion of a Baneling drop, of course, but it's still something to distract because Elazer never went into the Hydralisk, never went into like 70, 75 drones, and is just going for a lot of roaches with that +1. So overwhelming here is key. HellraiseR actually trying to meet the army. Is that really the best decision? I don't know about that. He knows these aren't Overlord transports, but they are going to provide creep, so extra speed on these roaches is pretty damn nice offensively. So many charge lots, however, available. Not a lot of force fields. Those roaches are kind of clumped up, but there's just so many of them that the Zealots, they need to go back to the big units, the Immortals, the Archons. The 2 Archons coming back from the Warp Prism, pretty critical here. This is where the clumping up of the roaches is actually really quite bad, as the Archons get the full splash damage available, and it looks like Elazer's army just cannot stand up to the technology that HellraiseR has. He does lose 1 Archon, and these other Archons are getting very low on their shields, but there's nothing to take down the Warp Prism. HellraiseR is all about the Warp Prism today, except as soon as I say that, he loses 2 of his Archons. Oopsie daisy. That actually kind of, okay. Meanwhile, roaches have been dealing some probe damage, but not a lot. HellraiseR still gonna tap out? Really? Huh. Okay, I don't think that's tap out, but I wanted to reevaluate in game in case, The thing is, right, that's a very classic PvZ scenario. The mass roach versus the tech of the Protoss. So Immortals and Archons. He had an Immortal just pop out. He had like 4 Zealots and a Stalker chasing down the Overlord, so it wasn't doing that much damage. And he had a new brand new warping of like 6 Zealots on the front line. I don't know if that's really tap out time. I guess what he was probably thinking is that he lost all those expensive slow-making units because he has to not only make High Templars, he also has to make them into Archons. And those roaches are getting across the map very quickly. They have roach speed and they have a creep highway. So I'm guessing he's thinking that was too many slow-building units to lose and he was going to fall eventually, which that's understandable. He might have. But those are definitely games that you see Protoss come back and then some. But losing, yeah, I guess losing things that actually work well with the Warp Prism, just, yeah, put him too bad of a position. All right, yeah, all right. Thank you all, W, for the 2 months Prime subscribe. Scrubscriber. Elazer's gonna need a minute here. Really, it's really too bad. HellraiseR was close to holding that initial push with 4 Archons and 2 Immortals. Those Archons would have been borderline useless for a little while as their shields regen, because he didn't have any shield batteries, but it was awfully close to saving them. Like, if another charge at Warping had happened, that would have cleaned up the remainder, probably. I don't know. It gets really tricky to really, you know, criticize someone for leaving a game. They don't have all the information, so it's not always the case that you are wrong for criticizing them. But you would never want to over-criticize. And there's definitely reasons why that tap out made sense. But there's also plenty of games you look back on and it's like, well, Protoss have recovered from this. So... I always hate when there's Protoss music in the background. I don't really want a choir in my ear. Game number 2, now ready to get going. New repugnancy. In the bottom left is the red Protoss. Down 1, it is HellraiseR. Reppin' Team Clash. In the top right is the blue Zerg. It is Elazer.
Resubscription received. Apparently you are doing something right, Captain.
Thank you, AKN14, for the 8 months. I have no anything to say, just thanks for the awesome streams. Well, that's all you need to say. Thank you. The way thinking after killing like 40 probes and getting outplayed. Okay, so the Terran was the one that was not happy. Gotcha. Alright, so Elazer able to overwhelm HellraiseR. I believe HellraiseR did have shield battery set up on the third base. It would have been different. Maybe he was absolutely correct in moving towards his opponent before everything was set up to try and kind of nip it in the bud. But ultimately, it didn't work out. Close stuff. That's usually what happens in those types of situations, right? Again, classic. The Roach, the mass Roach versus whatever the Protoss has got. Generally, you see extremes even 60, 70 army supply above the Protoss opponent, but when it's pure Roach, the Protoss can still end up holding. In fact, there's one that happened recently in WCS Winter. I forget who it was between, though. Drogo? I think it was a Drogo game, right? But anyways, so when it got down to like the 40 supply difference, at the end there, army supply difference, there was always that little bit of like, well, if you had 2 Immortals and a War Prison still ready to go, if you had 2 Archons still alive, could it have been a fine game? because his economy also wasn't really torn to shreds like it could have been. He actually was trying to stay on top of that Overlord drop. But that Overlord drop was also kind of the neat little twist on an otherwise very, just, I don't want to say a movie, but you know, kind of, right? you make Roach and you attack. But it was a nice twist on it. There's a chance that they don't pay attention, or that they missplit against it, or God forbid they send an important unit towards it, right? An Immortal and an Archon, and thus don't have enough on the front lines. Plus you get the Overlord Creep Highway, which doesn't really usually come along with an attack like that. So just little additions made it really cool. HellraiseR just taps out, goes into the next game. He could find himself in a similar position, really. But there are many ways to play this matchup, and HellraiseR is already changing up his way of doing it, so he's opening up with a Robo. Thank you, Shepherd604, for the 19 months. Oh god, hold on. 19 hype? Nice. So Immortal comes out. Robo opener maybe came into play kind of because alongside of whatever the Knights are in play, that it started to dominate and continues to be a presence in this matchup. It's definitely not gone, but it is a little bit easier to deal with. I still think the more mid to late game Metaswarms can be problematic, but the early all-in is definitely easier. Probe surrounds actually do a decent amount of damage now. But there's a lot of things you can do with the Robo opener. So again, that's why it kind of seems like it came kind of coincidentally around it, but that could have just been, you know, us meager casters only getting sight on what was plaguing the ladder for many months beforehand. Whatever. We've seen the Stalker drops harassment that Stats was doing. Showtime was doing something that Hearthstone was also doing, which is just like really fast charge with some Zealot harassment. But this is just a good old-fashioned starting off with Immortal drop harassment, but adding in just a couple of Zealots. I mean, it's a very tiny army, but it's so early on that Elazer could very well just still be droning, could have no access to a Roachborn yet, and be in trouble because Feelings would struggle against this plus a War Prism. But he actually has access to Roaches, and while initially they don't look so great, they're about to come out here in full force. And there's still 4 Queens too, which are not too shabby. In fact, they already got on top of the War Prism, not quite damaging the hull, and the Immortal was saved. That's the most important part there. But the Zealots, was it really worth it? You had, what, 3 Zealots die for 3 drones, and I think a not canceled Spore Crawler. I don't know about that. But they did also cause Elazer to build a heck of a ton of Roaches when otherwise he would have delayed that a little bit more until maybe the 50 mark, right? Like last game. So those are things to consider. HellraiseR is following up here with a lot of gateways, trying to keep them hidden as well. There's no Overlord this time scouting into that main base. He's keeping tabs on it, in fact, with the Stalker here again, which happened last time. But obviously Elazer now knows that there was a Robo first. It's kind of obvious by now. And is now able to send an Overseer through the bases and see eventually the 3rd Nexus is down too. By the way, when I said Speedlings, I guess I meant Slowlings. Elazer never went for Speedlings, so there you go. Thank you, Pinochle, for the 13 months. Templar Archives, Charge finishing up, +1 finishing up. Things are getting into that setup that was, I mean, actually quite similar to last game, but we are missing the War Prism, the Archon War Prism harassment, and of course the Stargate Opener, which Stargate Opener didn't really do a whole ton. Killed an Overlord, got a couple of drones, couldn't really help against the Roach Flood, right? So maybe skipping that portion, you're gonna be a little bit better off, but I don't know about this, right? So HellraiseR stops building probes, even though his 3rd Nexus is very close to being done. This little Slowling, we'll see there's only a couple coming over here. But it should, you know, most importantly, you should be seeing that the army's moving out. Elazer was already at a decent army from the initial flood of Roaches, but also has committed to more and has Ravagers already ready to go. This feels like someone attacking into someone who was ready to attack them. And unfortunately, the numbers could work out in favor of Elazer. Plus, he still has an advantage on his side as the Warp Prism is going to be used to ferry these units around, micro them, not necessarily to warp in. But these are very strong units against what Elazer has, so it's definitely possible it turns the other way. The roaches actually have pretty much been killed. The initial front line of roaches have been killed. Here come the reinforcing ones. So when you start digging into those expensive slow-building Ravagers that you really feel quite confident as the Protoss. HellraiseR did manage to get another warping of Zealots, that fodder for his important units in, and it seems like they will just go ahead and bounce off each other here with minimal losses, or rather like inexpensive losses, right? They both traded out their roaches and their Zealots. So maybe HellraiseR didn't have an idea that it's going to be a mass roach flood again. Maybe he's definitely thinking more about it. He is still looking to meet it kind of halfway, get the fight started off on the right foot. It could go poorly. Maybe he gets surrounded. Maybe those Ravagers get all some corrosive biles because he gets surrounded. Or maybe he goes too far into creep because he's a little overconfident. But this is the army that can do well against what Elazer has if it's in that proper position. And, well, is also microed. But speaking of proper positioning, it's definitely not here. A recall could be used, but the recall's not very big. You're going to be bringing back maybe your Mortals and your Archons, but maybe you miss a bunch of Zealots. And, well, you could also just choose to do that at a later time and try and do economic damage to them, which is exactly what's going on here. Tons of Zealots pouring in. The Immortals, though, left on the backside, not being paid attention to. The War Prism also taking a ton of damage. Actually goes down. So important there. I don't think this decision is going to work out well for HellraiseR. These Immortals are barely living. One died. This one finally goes down, too. So that's 2 Immortals, 2 Archons. It's still a ton of charge lots. Damage going down everywhere. But, uh-oh, look at these pylons. Pretty vulnerable pylons here. Not that there was a lot of production that HellraiseR could use, because, again, he lost his War Prism. His third base is also under attack. It looks like it will be cleaned up by Zealot reinforcements, and that's probably where we're going to see the recall happen when it happens. But is this game actually going to go in HellraiseR's favor? As the roach numbers grow thin, as they start to actually have to pop out of each individual hatchery and join up with each other, they start to look really bad. I mean, these units probably won't even do anything. Maybe look at that sentry, and in fact, Elazer agrees, just cancels every single one of them. We're on full base trade territory here. Elazer only slightly up in army. That's a terrible position to be in when you're only on Roach Ravager. Even though HellraiseR's army isn't all Immortal or Archon. That's hard to say, all Archon. It's a lot of charge lots. That's still a lot of damage, all right? Elazer is probably feeling less and less comfortable as the game goes on, as more and more of his supply got chopped to bits, trying to spawn out, trying to take on what was still very chunky Immortals. They even have some cannons being added in as the Forge wasn't taken out here, so it's something, you know? They're not gonna get a Roach, it looks like, or maybe 1 or 2, but that's already pretty good. They get 1. These charge lots aren't going to do too much either. They get 1 Roach. Not exactly a great trade, but this is still going to be really weird because, you know, if Elazer would have pulled back and maybe get on creep, again, with that surround, Corrosive Biles hit these 4 very important units, maybe that's enough because then you can kind of kite away from the Zealots after that. But another loss of pretty important units. The Queens go down. They had Transfuse. They had a little bit of extra damage, but yeah, mostly Transfuse. And they are no longer going to be helpful. Elazer down to 1 hatchery. Elazer on no nexus. We're actually going into full base race. Like, we're actually talking about the last possible structure available. No one really has any production except for that base. It's all about the structures. This hatchery's going to finish, but that's it, actually. Elazer doesn't have any more workers. Actually, he needs to build that 1 last worker or he's going to lose this game. Oh, he's going to lose. He's going to lose. That's it. That's it. That hatchery is just dead. Oh, my God. Oh, GG, GG. You don't see many games end like that. But it was also getting to that point where I changed. I was like, HellraiseR lost the Warp Prism, he lost 2 Immortals. I thought maybe his armor wasn't gonna be good enough, but then he saw that army supply just creep down, I guess, for Elazer, and it's like suddenly, oh wait, no, HellraiseR's army does beat Elazer's army. They didn't even need to. He just took on the hatchery, the last hatchery. Sick. Oof. thank you for the bits, Mono Pink. An awesome game. That was pretty down to the wire. So the lobby's full again. Hopefully we didn't miss anyone who was originally in here. Okay, HellraiseR needed 2 minutes. I'm gonna be right back then. Alrighty. Let's get into the game. It's all tied up now. On the bottom right, winning that base race, it is HellraiseR. In the top left is the blue Zerg. It is Elazer. Alright, so, Elazer, probably a little shocked at how that game ended. I think when he, hurriedly built that drone, he realized he didn't have any other buildings, so he maybe saw it, saw his death coming. But just, 2 or 3 minutes before that, probably thought he had a handle on things. You lose your main base, maybe, and your natural base for sure, because your base racing, but then they recall. If you get a couple of cheap shots in as the recall happens, and you get out and still play on the game, but instead of forcing like what was hopefully an awkward, unconfident response from HellraiseR, HellraiseR actually chose something, and that's often what the difference is between winning a base race and not winning it is that if you just choose to do something, it's better than waiting and waffling and then choosing to do what is maybe ultimately the correct thing, as it might be too late by then, right? So just choosing to go for the attack ended up working out. Could have been even better had he saved the Warp Prism, right? Would have felt very confident in his win if that had happened, but it worked out super well for him. It just probably won't happen again. You can't really depend on that type of game to happen, but 2 games in a row, Elazer has gone for just really mass Roach. One game he skipped speed, which is something maybe you can really read into, and then otherwise it's just been roaches, 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 and an attack, which was a little more awkward last game because HellraiseR did more than just meet it in the middle of the map. He was also doing his own attack and really was trying to posture around it. Same opener from last game from HellraiseR. So, Stalker, hold off against the Overlord, and a Robo in the main base. Imagine that Immortal first. And there it is, the Chrono. Elazer is, once again, skipping that speed. I went up to 176. 200 gas and not going for any speed. Not going for any like super fast layer either, so no Nidus Room shenanigans. Probably be a bad idea against someone who doesn't need to be on guard against it. And again, it's not as effective as it used to be, so more regular timed layer, save time Roach Warren. This is a map where your Overlord can't quite see those gases, which does kind of suck. Spore Crawler made because the sights on the Robo never happened, just like game number 2. So it could have been a Stargate. It's not. The Warp Prism's still going to be helpful in maneuvering around to deal with the Warp Prism. Eventually, if it has to. As, again, that Warp Prism is on the way, so... but this is not going to be that kind of awkward single Immortal, 2 Zealots, and oh, very different follow-up here. This is going to be the double Immortal harassment, so pack quite a punch. And kill drones pretty quickly, and you're gonna pick off roaches super easily. A double Stargate follow-up. That is sneaky. That is very sneaky. I do think this could be awkward. I mean, ultimately, if you get to a good number of Phoenix, you can also produce Void Rays if you believe Elazer's going to do that all in again. Then you might look like you're a genius, but things go wrong. Maybe the attack happens faster than you thought it would. Only having 6 Phoenix, might not help out against what is an overwhelming amount of roaches. We don't have +1 missile on the way, but it's actually because the Lazer's gonna go for a Spire here. So the Immortals are juggling against the roaches, not scouting the main base or the natural. The roaches will only have that roach speed on their side. Maybe eventually you get the +1 missile, but first off, that Spire, which is quite fast. Now this no longer... Oh, he's gonna go double Oracle. Okay. Well, still. Again, like that maybe the timing of a Roach all-in of any type could be difficult to hold with double Stargate only just producing. This actually is just straight up bad for Elazer, right? You now have a Protoss who is capable of making double pumped Phoenix, not as they desperately try and buy time for the Stargates to finish, but rather as soon as they see it is a Spire, which this Observer is very close to doing. The Immortals in the main base also might be able to do that, or even get hints as to it being a Spire. I'm not sure exactly what would hint that, because it's kind of difficult to read into. You don't want to bring roaches to the front line, deal with Immortals anyways, so it's not like you're showing that you don't have a lot, and actually there still is quite a few roaches, so... Yeah, they did miss out on the Warp Prism, or rather, reverse that. The Warp Prism missed out on that, but does he have enough to defend with whatever he's got at home? He still has the Oracles bulking up, so desperate times, if the roaches do attack his third base, he could use them and show them. But the roaches actually come back. Not too much of a committal there. Warp Prism's still alive, Double Immortal's still alive. This is where the Mutas will, the very least, force this away, but they're not even gonna get the kill, which would have been a lot better, right? So the Warp Prism's gonna go home and defend here. But, 9, it's actually, Elazer's not even just going for like 9 mutas. He's going for, or 11, no, 16. No, I can't do math. Yeah, 11. I was right the first time. Is he gonna go any higher than that? I think the mutas, okay, the Warp Prism comes back in, by the way. So the mutas kill the Warp Prism, get 2 Immortals as well. Then the roaches come in. And there's no Phoenix. It was actually just oracles. In fact, the third Stargate was built for more oracles. Okay, maybe mutas are the right thing to do then, because what a weird game. Maybe mutas are exactly what you need then. The oracles can't do anything about the mutas, and as long as they help deal with this a little bit, then it might have been worth it. Okay, well, the mutas, not all of them were here together, and oracles are speedy little bastards, so okay, they run into a war prism or a spore crawler. War prism did die, by the way. That's why the mutas weren't immediately on top of the oracles. No, this is better for Elazer, right? The roaches get a little split up here. They're gonna take out one immortal. Oh, looks like the war prism died, not the immortals. Oh, this is actually this is such a weird game. So the Phoenix were made. As soon as you saw there was mutas, Phoenix started to be produced. So the mutas had their time limit expire. It just was a question of like, did they do enough by killing the war prism? Did they do enough by helping against the oracles? And I think they did. I think the mutas end up being ultimately worth it. They might die to the Phoenix here, but we now have Corruptors in play too. The Roaches did break through, killing 23 probes here to make up at least for the damage the Oracles did before they were cleaned up. And now HellraiseR is going to be just on Phoenix against what is... Well, actually, he's not going back into Roaches. This is such a weird game. Such a weird game. If you go back into Roaches... Okay, well, it doesn't matter. HellraiseR just taps out, which I think is right. There are so many more options, I think, for Elazer to